Dear friends and colleagues of ICT, these are weird times we are living in right now. The coronavirus is changing our way of life, the way we work, our leisure time, and so on and so forth. And we are conducting this Zoom international conference, if you wish, or memorial for the 9/11, which we used to do on an annual basis. In Israel, we do it first time and hopefully last time online. And we do it due to the challenges that we are facing in reference to the coronavirus pandemic. I'm being asked as an expert of counterterrorism by many colleagues and journalists and the public at large, what are the common denominators between those two phenomena, which I refer to both of them, by the way, as pandemic? The pandemic of COVID-19 and the pandemic of global terrorism. And the first common denominator that I would like to note for this presentation is the fact that we are talking about two lethal phenomena. Those are life-threatening phenomena, which unfortunately impose many victims around the world. But it's not just the lethality of the threat. It's also the fact that those are epidemic phenomena. It's contagious. It's inflicting this threat from one person to another person, and it's cross-border. The coronavirus doesn't recognize any border, nor the global terrorists. They are cross-border phenomena. And unfortunately, in both cases, we see it materialized in exponential way. Coronavirus is quite clear why it's exponential, but when we talk about terrorism, think about incitement for terrorism or waves of terrorism like the lone wolf phenomenon. It's not just contagious, and not just cross-border, it's also exponential. One might inflict the virus, the incitement virus in this case, on many. One might live in one country and have an impact on many countries at the same time. But it's not the only common denominator. Both threats, the COVID-19 and global terrorism, is spreading anxiety. We hear the personal stories of so many people around the world that they have been victims of either the virus or terrorism. We identify with them, and we understand that both phenomena are random phenomena, which actually multiple the fear and anxiety because it might happen to anybody, anytime, everywhere. The consequences of the phenomenon is also a common denominator. The horrendous economical impact of coronavirus, we live it today, we see it, and we don't know where it's going to end, but also the global terrorism phenomenon had and still have an extensive economic consequences. Think about the tourism industry. Think about the air travel, security, and so on and so forth. We're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars which are being spent in order to contend with those two challenges and two phenomena. The worst case scenario in both the COVID-19 pandemic and also in global terrorism pandemic, the worst case scenarios are the collapse of stability, of governance. It could be health system, it could be other types of governmental systems, but in both cases, those are the challenges that we might find ourselves facing. But I would like also to stress the impact of the two phenomena and the challenge in contending those two phenomena. When we talk about COVID-19 and we talk about the global terrorism, we see many common denominators in the challenge of dealing with those threats. First of all, let me use the term, the democratic dilemma in counterterrorism and the democratic dilemma in contending with the coronavirus. The democratic dilemma is the effort to find the right balance between effective counterterrorism activity and liberal democratic values. This challenge is becoming even a bigger challenge based on the fact that the phenomenon is a life-threatening. You want to preserve the right of the people at large to live. That's why you need to find effective tools to contend with terrorism. The same with coronavirus. This is a life-threatening phenomenon, and we need to find tools that sometimes, unfortunately, impose restrictions to the liberal democratic value. Think about privacy. Think about the right movement or gathering, and so on and so forth. Both cases, the coronavirus and global terrorism, inflict harm on liberal democratic values. In some cases, they also use the same type of technology for that purposes, AI, big data surveillance, which is used for both purposes. And both phenomenon actually lead to the understanding that we need to find checks and balances to find the right balance in the democratic dilemma. The technological factor is important in those two phenomena, and of course, many believe that the solution to the challenge of contending with those phenomena will come from the technological new inventions, but also from dual-use type of technology that on one hand is useful for security affairs, to counter-terrorism, on the other hand for civilian affairs like the pandemic of coronavirus. Another common denominator which is important to stress is the need for cooperation. You know, we have the saying in counter-terrorism that says that it takes a network to beat a network. And this is so true because one state, one agency, one community cannot contend with the phenomenon of terrorism, local terrorism or global terrorism alone. There is a need for international cooperation to prevent incitement, to share intelligence, and so on and so forth. But the same thing you would find in contending with the coronavirus. There is no meaning of one state solving the problem or lowering the level, the threshold of the eruption of the virus in the country, as we see now when we witness the second wave. When you open the borders, it comes again. And therefore, one needs international coordination, not just cooperation, but also coordinations in reference to having a joint thresholds and regulations of social distancing and so on and so forth, if we really want, as a whole world, if we want really to find a way to contend with the phenomenon. But it's not just international cooperation, it's also interagency cooperation. We find in both cases, counterterrorism and countering the COVID-19 virus, we find the need to engage different governmental ministries, defense ministry, health ministry, treasury, education ministry, and so on and so forth. They need to work together. There is no way to contend with this phenomenon alone. Also, different national apparatuses, National Security Council, the Army in Israel, the IDF, intelligence services, intelligence agencies, police, all need to work together to build an effective policy to contend with this phenomenon. Last but not least in this regard, the municipal authorities. The government needs to find a way to work with the municipal authorities, for example, in COVID-19 epidemic investigations or isolated people and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, many of the municipalities also bury the responsibility and the damage for terrorist attacks that occurs in their territory. Government-public cooperation. As we see, we have different types of communities within the same state, and some of those communities are more vulnerable to the threat, vulnerable to COVID-19, if we talk about elderly people, or more vulnerable to terrorism, if we talk about immigrants society, minorities, and so on and so forth. You need to find a way to cooperate between the government or governmental systems and those communities, the lay leaders of those communities, in order to be effective in contending with this phenomenon. G2B, government to businesses. Also, there is a need to work together for social distances regulation within the businesses, but also in order to harness their knowledge and capabilities to develop the technology, to conduct the R&D, to find a solution to those specific problems. G2A, government to academia, another type of cooperation, scientific research that needed to be done in order to have better solutions to this phenomenon. Consulting, scholars consulting the decision makers. The other common denominator in contending with this phenomenon is the need for early prevention. Intelligence gathering, intelligence information is crucial in counterterrorism, but it's also crucial in contending with the coronavirus. I'm sure you're familiar with the slogan, if you see something, say something. This was prepared for counterterrorism, but it's also true in order to identify early stages of the coronavirus in different communities altogether. Resilience. We need a society that will be resilient physically and mentally to the threat of those two pandemics. The public at large, but also the first responders themselves need to be resilient. And in both cases, there is a need to give regulation to the public, what they should do, what they should refrain from doing altogether. Crisis management, two huge crises we're talking about here, and we need professional decision-making process in order to have an effective solution to the problem. Clear chain of command. In Israel, we are still debating who's the person who's responsible for this crisis management. Is the PM, the Prime Minister? Is it the Health Minister? Is it the Head of National Security Council? Or the project manager that was appointed for that purpose? The division of responsibility. And I would emphasize the division of responsibility between different agencies, different offices, without ego. How difficult it is to do without personal ego, institutional ego, and in a synergetic way that everybody will benefit from this type of cooperation. And of course, we need a learning curve. These are two developing phenomena. Terrorism is changing by the day. COVID-19 is changing by the day. We need to be all the time on a learning curve. And of course, we need to communicate with the public. We need to be transparent to the public in order to do what? In order to build the trust of the public in what the decision makers are doing, to have a very clear, systematic, and updated instruction for all of those purposes. I would like to sum up by emphasizing the fact that these are not just similar phenomena. There are also quite a lot of differences between the two, between COVID-19 and global terrorism. The first difference, if you don't buy conspiracy theories and you don't think that this was an intentional, I'm talking about COVID-19, an intentional pandemic that was created by the Chinese in order to achieve that thing or the other thing, if you don't buy that explanation, then the main difference between COVID-19 phenomenon and global terrorism is the fact that global terrorism is man-made malicious activity, and coronavirus is a natural disaster of this sort or the other sort altogether. And in terrorism, you have a malicious intent. In COVID-19, you don't have this malicious intent. Even, by the way, if you buy the theory that this was some kind of an experience in China that find a way out of the laboratories, but not without an intention and malicious intent altogether. And this actually leads to another difference, that terrorism is aimed to serve a specific political or states' interests or non-state actors' interests altogether. At least the COVID-19, again, if we don't buy the malicious Chinese intent conspiracy is not aimed to the same goal. And also, last but not least, the ability to aim the threat towards a certain target communities. Although global terrorism is a random phenomenon, but it has a concrete type of audiences or victims, if you wish. It could be Israelis, it could be Jews, it could be Christians, it could be crusaders, it could be infidels, you name it, but there is a common denominator of the type of the victims that you want to harm and you want to threaten and you want to impose fear and anxiety on them. Coronavirus, like any other virus, cannot be controlled and you cannot designate it to a specific type of audience or a specific type of differences. I would like to really conclude with maybe some optimistic argument by saying that once we are all facing the same challenge, the same threat of COVID-19, of global terrorism, this is the time to unify our efforts and to have a common struggle based on the common suffering from this phenomenon and to unify humanity against those two phenomena. This is, again, the concept of it takes a network to beat a network. And I do believe that what ICT achieved in almost 25 years of operation and in our annual international conferences and in this specific memorial event is doing exactly that, is building those global networks in order to contend effectively with the global challenge of global terrorism. Thank you very much.